Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming. And today I'm pretty much going to try to sum up my entire PhD in like 20 minutes. So this was the exact title of my PhD. And so it's currently in pre-examination. In Finland we have a system where we have pre-examination and we have the actual examination, and it takes a long time. So I'm expecting to get my pre-examination reviews in about 2 weeks. Right, I wrote here. So, so basically, what I asked in my PhD was what kind of creative social agents are record producers, and what perspectives can my case studies on in comparison to different recording practices provide concerning the agency of the producer in these particular cases, and more generally, quite a long question. I broke it down into 3 different kinds of questions. So, because these are kind of the things that I thought were important in the record process from the perspective of the producer's agency. So, how do producers use music technologies in the record process, and in what ways do these music technologies and technological practices influence and contribute to the formation of the producer's agency? So that's kind of the technological side of it. So, in a way, I'm kind of, in this session, I'm kind of taking a departure from what you were talking about and you were talking about before. So here I'm kind of, I've always been interested in technology only insofar as it influences people's behavior or how to do things or what they are able to do. I did do an audio electronics course during my undergraduate, but I never finished it because I was too lazy counting the diagrams that you had over here. It's all fascinating stuff. I just don't understand it, or I'm not that interested. The second sub-question I presented was how do music producers use studios, and how do music production studios as physical cultural spaces contribute to and affect the formation of the producer's agency. And I also asked how do social interactions with other creative parties in the record production process influence the formation of the producer's agency. So I had 3 ethnographic case studies. One on the popular music production in a home studio. It was a kind of a pop production, what the producer himself called urban pop. He worked with this female vocalist called Ida Paul, half American, half Finnish. Was singing in Finnish in Finland. And then I did a rock production case where the producer was this Finnish-Swedish guy called Tuomas Olsson. And he worked with this band called Blind Channel. And then I did a classical production case with producer Seppo Sirala, and they recorded an Estonian composer, Erkki Sven II's 8th Symphony, which is this modern orchestral concert music. I was thinking about, I thought it'd be nice for you guys to get to listen a little bit about from each production case, so you get an idea of what type of music they were producing. Top HDMI. No. VGA, that's true. Yeah. Yes, okay. So this is the first one. The pop producer, Mika Vepsäläinen.
Kun ei löydetä sanoja, kulutetaan kilpaa, stadin baarihanoja. Ja kauan ennen iltaa sulle on soittanut kahdesti, mistä ees pyytelen anteeksi. Pää täynnä sankkaa savua, yksin kahdestaan. Kuinka hiljaa voi huutaa apua, et kerkee vastaamaan. Et koskaan kerkee vastaamaan. Kunhan muut ei tiedä, ette sano mulle hyvää yötä enää. Kunhan muut ei tiedä, et tyhjyys kaikuu seiniltä meillä. Ei tiedä.
it's kind of an EDM-based pop music kind of thing. The second case study that I did was, like I said, it was a band called Blind Channel with the producer Jonas Olsson, and it sounds like this. This is a song called "Alone Against All." It's their original song. They themselves call it violent pop, but I mean, like every new band has to have a new genre, though, right? Because otherwise they're not significant or whatever. The third case study of the classical, it sounds something like this, quite a departure from the two that you just heard, but so you get the picture. This is modern orchestral concert music. This was a first recording of this this piece. Right. No. PC. Yes. Right. So how I got interested in what the producers do in the studio in the first place was when I was doing my bachelor's degree. I was studying, I also did a lot of music criticism, and that included a lot of independent records as well. And what I noticed was that every time there was a producer involved, it sounded better. I didn't know why, but it sounded better, even if it wasn't a particularly good producer. But if there was self-produced and the artists were usually really proud of it, it didn't really sound good. And if there was a producer, it sounded better. So I did my master's on the same topic, but on just one case study at the time. So, what's the relevance or importance to the research field? I should be able to explain this to you because I have a defense coming, and somebody's going to roast me on this anyway. So for me, what the contribution is I'm providing a kind of grassroots level analysis of what happens in the studio between the producer and the artists in different kinds of settings. I provided an in-depth ethnographic analysis of the work of a classical producer, which is there's very little written about classical producers from an ethnographic perspective. And to find out how the structures surrounding the reproduction process are manifested in the studio production process. So I mean, there's a lot of analysis on like music industry, for example, how different parts of the industry influence the producer, different actors in the industry. My point is to is to describe and analyze how all this is manifested in the studio production process. For me, ethnography was the only way to conduct this sort of a multifaceted analysis on my research questions. Of course, you could do a research where you just interview people, but then you only get the perspective of the producers. And this way, I was able to kind of cross-examine interviews, what the producers told me, what the artists told me, what I observed myself in the studio. And I also did a little bit of music analysis to the extent that they actually provided me some music. The rock band, for example, they promised me to send like different versions of their music along the way of the production process, and they were like, yeah, we're going to send you that. They never sent me anything, so okay, sure. That's fine. So how do I define agency? I've defined agency in this piece of research in the words of Timothy Taylor, as an individual's or collective capacity to move within a structure, even alter it to some extent. So, how much you're able to move within the structure that surround the music production process as a producer, and whether or not and to what extent you're able to actually alter the structures defines the strength of your agency in the process. So the structures then would be technological. That's an obvious kind of starting point. You have all this technology that you need to use, in order to be able to produce music and a record. Now the physical structure, you have the spaces, the studio spaces, but then again, a lot of times it's hard to actually separate the two, the studio space and the technology from one another, because they're kind of interconnected, especially in the DAW production setting. And then you have a lot of different kinds of social structure, which would include, one, something as an artist, what kind of artists you're working with, producers working with. How's the market set up? Finland is a very small market area. It comes with its pros and cons then, obviously, but for example, for a Finnish pop artist, it's really hard for any label to start making music in the English language. Nobody will sign them, because then you're competing with like the superstars in the world, right? So a lot of times Finnish artists end up doing music in Finnish, because it's easier to sell it in Finland. Then culture structures, what are the expectations here? How are things kind of supposed to be done? How were they done before? What can we change in the process? Also genre related. Obviously there's different kind of set of values in rock music and classical music and compared to pop music, for example. And the skill thing was kind of hard for me. I don't know. It seemed like the producers were they weren't striving to perhaps learn so much anymore. They were kind of just doing what they could already do. So that was kind of a challenge for me to analyze. But this obviously kind of also contributes to the agency of what the producer is able to do, what can he or she do. What I found out was that technology, for example, and these are some of the results of the entire PhD, right? So I'm trying to squeeze them in a short period of time. So what I found out was, for these producers, technology wasn't really important in itself, and it was only important as insofar as they could realize their creative ideas with the technology. And this is also what Adam Morgan found in his PhD from 2014. And one really interesting thing that I found about in the rock production case was how the producer would use digital technology and the possibilities afforded by digital technology to restructure a process to enhance the motivation of the musicians. So traditionally, you just spend a day in the studio, you record all your stuff, and then the producer goes and works alone on it, and edits everything, and mixes and all that. So he said, if the artist has a shitty feeling when she's playing or singing, doesn't mean that the take is necessarily shitty, but if she has a shitty feeling about it, like, fuck, I played like shit, and I go, yeah, it sounds good, yeah, let's proceed. Then she does another take with a shitty feeling, and in the end, she had a shitty feeling about the whole recording day, and when she returns the next day, the shitty feeling from the day before remains and is added to the vocal performance. So this is kind of what he was talking about when, what he did was he'd do a little bit of recording, like guitar for example, and then he'd throw the musician out of the studio, the control room, and then edit everything so it sounds good, make it sound good. So then the artist would come back to the studio and like, yeah, it sounds good, cool, let's go on. So that would kind of enhance the motivation of the artists during the process. In this way, the kind of the technological practice kind of influences the social practice or social side of the production process. What I found about one new thing that I found was this idea of trackerism, or the producer as tracker, which I've actually written an article about to JARP in 2017. And this was specific to the pop case study, where the producer described himself as a tracker. Also, a Finnish scholar called Riikka Hiltunen, who's also here. She's also written about this in a songwriting context. So this applies to producers that also work in the compositional process of music. And then in the classical case study, technology was used mainly to record, and then the producer used technology mainly to construct the performance, because in classical music you're kind of supposed to have the idea that it's a real performance, but then again the producer actually composed or constructed the entire performance from 88 different takes. So there wasn't actually, they didn't have an entire take of the whole thing to begin with. The same thing, what was kind of emphasized in the classical case study was technology as a means of mediating communication, which was probably the most important thing, task of the producer during the recording sessions, where he'd have the control room, which was separately constructed because the concert hall didn't have an actual control room. So then he'd have the producer, the engineer, and the composer in the control room, and the musicians in the concert hall. And then the producer only had a score, a pen, and then this red button that looked like a nuclear launch button, like a very big one. And then the only thing it did was would enable or disable communication between the control room and concert hall. There were a time when the people in the control room, the producer, the composer, and the engineer, they would say things that they want the musician to hear, because that would affect their motivation again. So that they disable that and talk it among themselves, and then they kind of rephrase the feedback to the musicians afterwards. Editing was then, of course, the main task. One of the main tasks of the producer in every case study. But the difference is that in pop, editing was actually a major part of the compositional process. In rock, it was a major part of the arrangement process, but then again, in classical music, it was only part of the construction of the performance. Recording space, right? I have a little bit of time. 2 minutes, okay, right? I thought that was actually going to be shorter. So then. Recording spaces. In the classical recording case, what limited the producer's stages was the fact that they actually had to record in the home venue of the orchestra. So the orchestra, they would have their own habits and their own wants and needs. So, for example, the producer wanted to rearrange the musicians to get a better balance to the recording. He wasn't able to do that because then the musicians started complaining, well, we can't find each other musically, whatever that means. Apparently they couldn't hear each other or the things that they wanted to hear when they were playing. So that would kind of limit the producer agency. In the rock case, what kind of came out from that was that the studio space was constructed by the producer in the way which was going to enhance his agency, where he would have all his gold records on display, and that would kind of, then the musician would call it, wow, dude, like, we got this gold record, it's cool, like, we really listen to this guy. And then also how he'd have recording space right next to the, like, attached to the control room, so you have a better connection with musicians. And the pop, and what was kind of emphasized in that was that the limitations of the home studio, where it's hard to find work-life balance, where you're at work all the time because that's your workspace and your rest space and your recreational space, and you sleep there as well. So actually, this pop producer, he got another studio. He moved his studio out of his home after this project. And well, so there were so many social structures though in place here that affected the producer agency. Obviously, relationship with the artist and producer, interaction with the band members. It was apparently very important that the producer was able to kind of, in the rock production especially, the producer was able to talk about stuff in between, like during breaks and stuff like that, really kind of strengthened the bond between the producer and the musicians. And then if you had a little bit of knowledge about music theory, for example, that would kind of strengthen his authority in the eyes of the musicians. Also using assistant producers in rock. Record label expectations only came up in the pop production, where the AFR would give feedback to the producer and the artist. For the classical one, like, they know it's not going to sell anyway because it's modern classical music. And in rock, it was more like the label boss would be like, well, go have fun, and that's it. Okay, I'm going to skip these, right? Okay, well, cultural conventions and historical conventions and how you're supposed to do things and ideologies about the work were important in the classical kind of, in the classical case study. And so, I've hated diagrams before, but I've started to, I try to learn to like them, because this kind of shows how sometimes it was really hard to separate the different kinds of structures from one another. They would always interact in interesting ways. And this is kind of where the analysis happens, right? In between, I don't know what you call this in English, like the overlaps of these different structures. Future research ideas, I have a couple that I've started to think about. I'm actually doing some research with Brendan Anthony from Australia right now. We're doing research on tracker producer education. He actually sent me an email today with some data. So that's going to be interesting. I'd like to do similar case studies in different countries. So because now I've done 3 different case studies to different styles in the same country. I'd like to do similar styles in different countries. Agency of female producers, a very under-researched area, and I'd also like to expand on the idea of the tracker in different genres in other countries. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. I think we're going to take one quick question. I'm sorry, question. Yes.
Thank you very much for your talk. Really interesting and I think really important to investigate the field. My question concerns one particular point, the importance of technology.
Yeah.
And you said that technology is not important in itself, but just as a tool, you know?
Yeah.
And I was wondering, where did you get this statement from? Was it from interviews you made?
Yeah, I got this from interviews, and also the notion, like, one of the producers said that he doesn't really care about the technology itself, just insofar as it enables the disabled student to realize his ideas that appear in his head. So, and when I asked him about all the producers, what technologies they use, they're like, oh, I have some mics, and I have some racks, and I have, Pro Tools and Logic, whatever, and I have a computer.
Yeah,
so they wouldn't dwell into the specifics of the technology.
Okay, they wouldn't, because I think it's important because it's highly questionable, these self-conceptions, because what's in there is like very old bourgeois art concept, like the author thing, but from a phenomenological perspective, you have to say technology is a very basic prerequisite for them to become experienced as pop musicians.
Yes, of course.
And this is something different than a tool. So I was wondering how you question these self-conceptions and how you deal with them, you know?
Right, that's a really important, interesting question.
Yeah, so just
kind
of a question and remark.
I need to think about that. Yeah, great, thank you very much.